40K Fanatics, it's Grimdark Garage time. The timeline has never been more warped as it is right now.
Yeah, we're getting pretty ahead of ourselves.
It's all messed up. Bolt Gun came out.
Yeah,
it got inserted in the middle of all the proceedings.
Love Bolt Gun.
It was all right.
I'm almost done with it.
By the time this is coming out, there's no telling how long ago you've heard the Bolt Gun pod. But if you missed it, go back and listen to it. You gave it an 8 out of 10. I gave it a 6 out of 10. I think that it might be a 7, but I'm playing Zelda, and I am fully submerged in the new Zelda.
Explains why you play it, Eldar.
I mean, we'll get to it in the bits box. Anyway, I'm Shane. That's Casey. Today, we're going to talk about Lionel Johnson.
Yeah, we're talking about Primarch today.
The Primarch of the
Dark Angels.
Dark Angels. I always want to call them Blood Angels, but I don't think that's it at all. That's a different thing.
R.I.P. my glorious Hawk boy.
Yeah. So we're going to get to that in the main topic, but first we're going to open up the bits box, and in there...
Open that big box.
I finally got my Elven Union Blood Bowl team finished.
They look good. I like the grass.
Yeah, I got the grass on them, and they were a little smurfy. Go on to the 40K Fanatics Twitter and look at the picture of them. I had done this Aldari kill team, and I did them real sort of jaundice pale yellow, and then I put some blue on them, and it turned out really good. And then for these guys, I was like, I don't need that step underneath, and they look like Smurfs. However, I got some Elmer's glue, and I got my grass, and I heavy duty dusted the grass over because
went old school with it.
Yeah, there were a couple things, right? So with a big O Space Marine, you can take your texture paints and things and just go right up to their feet, and it looks fine.
Yeah.
But with elves and smaller things, their little feet are so tiny and so flat.
Little baby feet.
Yeah. It'd be like the guy...
You might cover them up completely.
Yeah, you could cover them up completely.
Yeah.
And even if you don't cover them up, it's going to look like the grass on this, ostensibly football field is like up above their ankles. Yeah. So that wasn't what I wanted.
Try using a palette knife.
Oh no, that's with a palette knife.
Ooh.
No, that AK texture paint is chonky. But what I ran into is a couple of things, which is the reason I even bring this up, because I think on a previous pod or a future pod, who knows, the timeline's messed up. I mentioned how the Blood Bowl dudes have got the slotted base.
Yeah, they got that slotted small base.
Yeah, and it's a problem. The slot is a problem.
Why are you running into the fact that it has all this hole left over?
Well, I drove around for like a week thinking, what am I going to do if I can't use the big chunky texture paint, which would have gone right over the top of it like concrete, no problem. But if I can't do that, there's no way I can pile up enough Elmer's glue on it to cover that. And then it occurred to me, cover it with paper.
There you go. Put some tape on it or something?
No, man. I just got printer paper, cut off little bits, and stuck it, because I already have the glue out, right?
Right.
So I take the glue, and I put it on, and I use my little palette knife and smooth it out, and then I took the paper and put it on there, and then I did just a ton of glue, real thick, spread that out. So now the whole thing is like white, and then I just piled the grass on it. I'm using that Army Painter grass. It's, there's like an inhalation danger with it, I'm sure, because it is.
I like that stuff.
Yeah, it's very fine. I put it on with tweezers, and I just piled it on, and then I'd tap the thing off. And with the grass on, they look good. And you were like, be a man, put some chalk lines on them, and I don't even know where to start with that. That seems like rife for disaster.
But it looks so good.
I know, but I think I'm close to moving into the sphere of not gluing my guys onto the base.
Okay.
At the building stage. Because, good painters, they milliput them down onto the base, or they do this, that, and the other, or maybe they just glue them to a wood block and all that kind of stuff. On one hand, it's way easier to hold the model in the painting handle if it's on a base. On the other, you run into this situation with the basing. I still have not based that Aldari kill team because
Better get on it. Kill Team's getting popular now.
I know, but they've got tiny little feet, and you know. So I don't know. I feel like maybe I'm going to do a similar thing with them and add some grass stuff so they'll be on grass. And then my idea is to take some washes of various colors and just put that into the grass. And hopefully that won't make the grass look soggy and gross. It might. I don't know. But at the end of the day, most of them have capes, so there's not a lot of basing that actually gets done. But I don't want to cover their feet. And so that's what I've done in the hobby. I also am having airbrush issues.
Oh.
Okay.
Oh,
I bought some Army Painter white primer.
Oh, no.
The airbrush type. And I've got the black and I've got the gray, and they work fine. And I put the white into the thing, and I shook it up.
Clog up?
It was like cottage cheese.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, so chunky.
Oh, yeah.
Couldn't even use it.
That's all white paint these days.
Man,
you know?
So I've got the, I picked it up today, the one-shot primer.
Yeah.
I got that in white, and it looks to be a lot thinner, and hopefully it sprays better.
You thought about trying white ink? I've never painted with ink.
I don't know where you even get a white ink.
Or maybe it's oil.
They don't have that at a friendly local game store around here. But I tell you another thing about the whole airbrush experience is I don't understand how to change colors.
Ooh.
So when I spray my black primer, it usually goes into a dry airbrush that I have to take apart and like scrape the old crusty paint off the needle and stuff. And then when I load it up with the black, it sprays fine. It goes perfect. It doesn't spit, nothing.
And then you got the problem of the black still being left over. Yeah,
and I'm trying different stuff. I'm trying like flow improver and stuff, and running that through it, and running water through it, and dumping it out, and spraying it out, and all this stuff. And then you go and you pour your gray in. You know, because what I've been doing lately, I primed the Dark Commune, which is a chaos character. It's 5 little tiny models that make up this one character unit, and I prime them black, and then I do a gray zenithal, and then I dry brush them white, so I don't need the white zenithal.
Mm-hmm.
And that's been my method for doing mostly black
armor
good. And stuff. Yeah, it's going to turn out fine. But you put the gray into the airbrush, and especially with all that flow improver that I've tried to run through it, you see like the black run up the sides of the cup.
Okay.
Because there's still just a ton of now super thin black. But then that tends to spray gray just fine. However, I tried to do this when I was painting a rhino, where I did black primer all over the thing, did not give her enough coats. And then I tried to switch to yellow, and there was no point where it ever sprayed straight yellow for the duration of the experiment.
That's yellow for you.
Well, and it's just because there had been black in it within the same 24-hour period, I guess. And I don't know what to do with that because, you see the guys on YouTube and they're like, and then I sprayed yellow, and then I sprayed white, and then I sprayed some pink. And I'm like, what magic are you doing to wash this thing out and change colors? All I want to do is change colors, Casey. I just want to change color. It's hard. And I'm stupid or something. That's what I got in the bits box. Go ahead.
Well, my bits box is pretty small. I finished my Megatrack Scrapjet. Just added some quick detail stuff to it. I'm going to post it on the Twitter, but not too long. We're trying to post more pictures of our minis on there. I thought it'd be nice to, show people what we're working with so they can relate to us. We're not up in our ivory towers just painting garbage, but whatever. So I've almost finished Bolt Gun. That's great. And on top of that, I am finished with that Leagues of Votan army, and I'm so happy.
Yeah, I saw you had that Seraphon army that you traded for that paint job.
Yeah.
Did you paint that army, or is it just in the box?
Actually, no, that's in the box. Somebody painted a couple things on there. Actually, one of the guys from the local community actually reached out and said that he had painted one of those models, and it actually sold within a day, $110, and that is the Lord Croak model. So yeah,
no kidding,
it's values at $130 retail.
Wow.
Yeah,
well, that's pretty good.
I'm looking about a $200 profit from selling all this stuff right now.
Getting money. You guys be sure to get on your various podcast apps and rate and review us so that we might eventually turn on all the ads and annoy you slightly.
Yeah, we in the Grimdark Garage.
Yeah,
really
we are in the
appreciate
garage still. What are we going to do?
I have no idea.
When it gets to be 100 outside.
Hey, at least we have a queue. We have a queue of other episodes coming up. We'll just wait for it to drop and then just the temperature to drop and just sit around until it does.
That will cover us for about 3 weeks, and then we will be in here sweating.
110.
What are you going to teach us about today?
So, Shane, our local game master, I am now the lore master of our group here, and what we are working on today is the Primarch known as the Lion, or Lionel Johnson. Have you heard of this guy?
I have.
He has such a sweet model. Actually, he's got 2 models. He has a model for 40K, current timeline, and he's got a model for Warhammer 30K, the Horus Heresy. And
I haven't seen that one.
They both look just phenomenal. Just great. But today's going to be a little weird. I'm going to run through everything as fast as I possibly can. There's a lot of lore about the lion, and hopefully we can hit it all.
I hope everyone can hear the lawnmower that just fired up. It's another lawnmower day.
Grim dark garage. Why is it every time we leave the garage door open?
Well, this is why we can't leave the garage door open.
Twice this has happened, and twice we've done this.
It's a lot of grass to mow. Casey's going to jump up and close the garage.
Yes,
and we're going to leave all this in. We're going to leave it all in because this is what it would be like trying to record a podcast in the 41st millennium.
Where there's only war.
Where there's only war. Only war and a lot of lawn care.
So we're going to hit the lion. We're going to hit his origins. We're going to talk a little bit about his legion, not a lot. That's going to be a separate episode. And then we're going to go into just dip our toes into the current setting. You know, just not go crazy with it. Because there's plenty of episodes we could probably talk about this guy.
So you're taking him straight from the Emperor's tube.
He has so many books. I tried to condense this down. I have 4 pages. 4 pages of notes right here. Anyways, so we're going to start off with the lion. As you know, every Primarch started off in their gestation capsule that was sent flying into the warp and then came out on a random planet. He ended up on a planet called Caliban. No one knows how long he was alone, but Caliban is, to describe it, a lush, verdant forest world where the human population is kind of low. It's technically a death world because it is inhabited by something called chaos beasts. Have you heard of these?
I have not.
A child of chaos has never heard of a chaos beast. Way to go. Chaos beast. So due to how close this thing is to the Eye of Terror, which was the big hole in the sky, straight to the warp, which is where all the traders, went eventually. But that's in the future. Anyways, it's close to the Eye of Terror, which is just this giant hole to the warp. And because of its proximity, the warp has kind of a radioactive effect, and flora and fauna react to it. So instead of getting trees the size of trees, you get trees the size of, like, those redwoods out in California. Or you get lions the size of elephants with 2 heads and tentacles all over its back.
It's the Godzilla effect.
Yeah, pretty much. It mutates them. Yeah, just 2000 Zilla. That's a I love that quote reference. But yeah, so the lion landed on this planet, and the humans there were in a feudal society. They had sort of a advanced technology, but not in the sense that you would think. They were sort of kind of like Fallout, where it's kind of like they had advanced technology, but they were relying on horseback stuff. They didn't have cars. They rode horses. They lived in castles. They had primitive power armor. They had laser rifles, maybe laser muskets, swords, and that's who defended them. The noble class were in knightly orders all across the planet defending the commoners, and these orders were very spread out and were the dominant, ruling class and protected everyone. The main one was called the Order, and the Order was a little bit more down to earth. One day, they're pretty much on the brink with these chaos beasts, fighting for survival every single day, and it looks like it's getting pretty dark, and the humans might get wiped out by these chaos beasts. So there's been stories, tales in the forest of a creature who has been killing chaos beasts, other chaos beasts. So it's probably like one that's way worse. It's been doing it near villages, causing hubbub, stealing a little bit of supplies here or there. And the Order sends a group into a hunting party to go find it. So this hunting party is led by a man named Luther. Luther is one of their most talented knights. If you had to say that he was the greatest man on the planet, you'd probably be right. He led this hunting party, eventually tracked down the creature, and they hunted it for days until they finally cornered it in, I think, like a cave. And it turned out it was a man. A very large, blonde-haired man with cat eyes. At least that's how I imagine it, I think. And everyone in the hunting party wants to kill it, except for Luther. Because they're like, oh my gosh, what is this giant monster? Let's kill it. And Luther is like, stop! He walks up. He brushes his long, blonde, silky hair out of his eyes and goes, hello, my lion. And he names him Lion L. Johnson, which in Calibanite is Lion, the son of the forest.
Neat.
No one knows how long he was alone. He was fully grown when Luther found him. For Primarchs, that's, around a year.
Right. And so he's been George of the Jungling the whole time.
Pretty much. He is pretty much a primitive man. He doesn't know English. He doesn't speak. All he knows is the ways of the predator and the hunter. Kill or be killed. Don't get into a fight that you can't win. Make calculated decisions. That sort of thing. Luther took it back to the Order, where he taught him how to be human. He taught him the ways of the Order and how to be like a knight. Eventually, the Lion saw him as he went from being like a foster father to a battle brother to a friend. And they both struck out to be the best they could in the Order. The Lion eventually, on the cusp of becoming the Grand Master of the Order, declared a great crusade, ironic, right, across the planet to kill all of the Chaos Beasts. And boy, did he put in a shift. I mean, it is said that he burned the forests from which they lived, poisoned the water from which they drink, and then hunted them in their caves. And he did not relent, because that is who the Lion is. He's a man of action before words. He's about killing the threat, going in, no qualms, and then just murder, murder, murder. And then once the fight's over, he's the victor. Move on to the next threat. Him and Luther led the charge for roughly 10 years. And right on the cusp of it becoming 10 years, that's when they won. Him and Luther were super battle-weary, super scarred, super tired, and then that was when the Emperor showed up.
Showed up on Caliban.
Yeah, and it turns out that just before he showed up, a lot of the rumors and legends of the Lion spread to the commoners and the people who wanted to join the Order and join the fight against these great beasts. Well, the other orders didn't really like that because they were the noblemen, the wealthy guys.
Right.
If everyone's a knight, then they're not knights. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. Some of them rebelled, and the Lion showed up, said, "You sure?" They're like, "Yeah, screw you." And he did not stop when he murdered them.
Killed everybody home.
He went room to room with his blade, taking down every single one, and he did not stop until he knew they were all gone. And then the Emperor showed up after he united the planet and freed them from the Chaos Beasts. The Emperor showed up with 500 of the angels of the First Legion, which is the legion that is Lionel Johnson. He is the first Primarch, the first out of them all, the most loyal son. The Emperor never doubted his loyalty. And even his Space Marines were legendary. They fought in the Unification Wars all the way into the Great Crusade and still exist to the current 40K setting. They are, in my sense of the word, what it is to truly be a Space Marine.
That's Azrael and Dim Boys.
Yeah, pretty much. They started out as they gave the Space Marines the name the Angels of Death. When the Lion saw these guys, he actually fought the captain of these 500 Space Marines and challenged him to a duel because he's a Lion. Don't just give it to me. You got to earn it. So he wanted their respect. He wanted to respect them. So he fought. He had a normal sword and normal armor, and he fought a Captain Space Marine in Terminator armor with a power sword. A couple hours later, he came out on top. And that's how disgustingly overpowered a Primarch is. Especially the Lion. So the Emperor and him consolidate power, spread across Caliban. They terraform the planet, put down factories, cut down forests, recruit Space Marines. Eventually, after a couple years, he had over 2,000 Space Marines, including the 500.
So the people got their wish. They got to become part of the Order.
Yep, and they made them. They showed them the Imperial truth.
When you say that the Lion is the first Primarch, was he the first one made, or he's the first one found?
Quite possibly. You see, each gestation capsule had a number on it, and there's not always knowing which one is which. We just know, according to the Legion order, which ones they are, except for one Primarch who actually has memories from when he was an infant in that tube.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And the and this Legion, they have like this real sort of a monastic sort of aesthetic.
Well, thanks to
green
the
with tan
Calibanite,
robes. Yeah.
Back then, they were black and red. All black, all red. And because of their use since the Unification Wars, they were experts in just about anything. A lot of the legions of other Space Marines came to them to learn how to be Space Marines. They were guides. They were always the first ones to a fight. They pushed ahead of every expeditionary fleet, and at that point, they were spread way too thin across the fringes of the galaxy. So the Lion had the idea, I'm going to unite the rest of my legion, and, well, he did. Went across space to the dark corners of the galaxy, uniting his legion, getting into similar duels like he did. He had, when he set out, he had, I think, 2 Adeptus Mechanicus Forge worlds dedicate themselves to him. He had multiple fleets that just showed up because they heard a Primarch was found. They had over 2,000 Space Marines of the 500 who came from Terra and the rest of the 1,500 who came from Caliban. And that was within the span of maybe a decade. And they had countless regiments of guardsmen that they recruited from Caliban on top of it. So they set out. They go on the Great Crusade. He unites his sons, doing battle after battle with them. I'm going to earn your respect, boy. And then after that, he gets with his leadership and does the same thing. That battle lasted, I think, 6 hours. He fought the head chief, the head honcho of the well, at that point they were not called the Dark Angels, but they would be. When he beat him, he called the Legion the Dark Angels because it was an old Calibanite legend that the Dark Angels with wings would fiery flaming sword would plow through the Chaos Beasts out in the forest of Caliban. And that is essentially why he named them the Dark Angels.
And that's what happened.
Yeah, so moving on from that, he set his sights on the dark outer rim of the galaxy where things were unknown. He fought in... His whole thing is about fighting monsters. He's a hunter at heart.
I see.
Because, he grew up George of the Jungle style.
Sure.
Fighting and killing monsters in the deep dark. He took part in something called... well, actually, I'm going to start with this one first. His first mission was a war where he backed up the Ultramarines. Because before they found him, the Dark Angels had a little run-in with the Ultramarines. The Ultramarines kind of shamed them a little bit and made them feel like, you're idiots for what you did. And then Rabute Gilliman and the Ultramarines left. So then the Lion made it his first priority to show up to this battlefield where the Ultramarines were getting wrecked. And then he's plows through the enemy, and he leads from the front. Sword drawn, power armor glistening in dark black, and just destroys the enemy in no time. And then he puts up a big flag, and it says, "You owe me one," or "We're even." We're even. And then he leaves. He doesn't say anything, just leaves. But there was some seeds growing within his legion. Luther, who I had mentioned before, was a full-grown man when the emperor showed up. They had plenty of recruits coming from the kids that lived on Caliban. But the older knights and Luther, I keep wanting to call him Luther, Luther would want to join the Dark Angels, but because they were fully grown men, they couldn't really be a Space Marine.
Right.
So they got augmented. They got bigger, gene augmentation, surgeries aplenty, and turned them into elevated people. But they would never be as strong or as fast as a Space Marine of the Dark Angels. Had the Lion never been found, Luther probably would have been the most influential person in Caliban's history. But then the Lion showed up. And that's when the jealousy really started. You see, the Lion is not really for accolades. He's not really for ribbons and parades. When the emperor showed up and gave him everything he gave him, he just said, "Okay." Pretty much. He didn't care. And Luther was like, "Man, he just doesn't appreciate everything he's getting. Why can't I get some of that?"
Right.
But he still tried to keep a positive relationship with him. So through the Great Crusade, they fought and they fought and they fought. One of the wars was the second and third Rongdon Xenocides. This is a species that had to be completely wiped out because of how devastating it was to the Imperium. We don't even know what they look like. They never described them, even in the books. There's no history about them, no comics, no pictures. Even in the lore, in the books, all trace of them has been wiped out. They were a slave-wielding super species with advanced technology that would come to human planets, and then when the Imperium showed up thousands of years later, the entire population of humans had slave collars that controlled their minds. They came at Lionel Johnson with a Death Star. And that was just the second war. And it was just a scout. Then when they pushed further out into the dark of the galaxy, they found countless empires of the Rongdon. In the second and third Xenocides of the Rongdon, 9 Space Marine legions fought. It took a whole decade to put these guys down. The Space Wolves lost 5,000 Space Marines. The Dark Angels lost 50,000.
Which sounds like a lot, but I imagine that the death toll of the Rondons was in the trillions.
Dude, it was 2/3 of their whole legion gone. And they still needed help. The Ultramarines, and because of this, the Ultramarines became the most highly numbered legion with 166,000. Which is like, for Ultramarines, who cares? Anyways, but most famous was the fight of the invasion of Dulin. The Lion shows up to Dulin. And I'm pretty sure I'm pronouncing that right. Dulin is the planet's name. It was a human planet that didn't want to be part of the Imperium. To bring it into compliance, the Lion meticulously planned out a strategy to invade and take them down and bring them into compliance. The Space Wolves showed up. Their Primarch said, "That's great," and wanted to go in and fight. They tried to call the planetary leader, and he told the Space Wolf Primarch that he would rip out his heart and feed it to his pet Grox, which is like a lizard, a cow lizard thing. And this enraged him so much that the Primarch of the Space Wolves just lost it, and the Lion was like, "I don't want you running in there. I have a plan." He's like, fine, but I'm going to be the first in there to kill this guy. The war fights, they go as planned, they siege the palace, and then the Primarch of the Space Wolves runs in there as fast as he can through the assault, and then he sees the Lion decapitate the leader of Dulin.
The Lion beat him to it, huh?
He stole his kill. And he was livid. So then he walked up when the Lion wasn't looking. And then when the Lion looked at him, he's like, "What?" And then he punched him in the face. And for those who don't know, the Space Wolves are kind of like Vikings.
Yeah.
As is their Primarch. So this was like a friendly brother type battle, but it was still like a whole thing. Honor is everything to them. The two Primarchs then fought for a whole day and a whole night, just punching it out, knocking each other with hits.
Wrestling.
The Lion was faster, but the Space Wolves Primarch Lehman Russ was stronger. So it was pretty much an even fight. After that time had ended, Lehman Russ looked at his brother, realized what they were doing was completely stupid, and started to laugh. At that point, the Lion thought that he was mocking him, and then cold-cocked him in the face and knocked him out. And then the Dark Angels just left. To this day, anytime the Space Wolves and the Dark Angels meet to fight on a battlefield, they begin by having an honor duel between two champions until first blood or knockout.
It's so silly.
For 10,000 years.
It's so silly.
It's 10,000 years. I mean, there was a time when the Lion was nowhere near the Space Wolves, but a squad was with them, and they were just like, okay, we're in a bad situation. We got to get some planning going. And then he just taps the Lion on the shoulder, and the Lion's like, what do you want? And he's like, honor must be upheld. And he's like, okay, choose your champion. He's like, me. And he's like, who's your champion? Primarch of the Dark Angels. And he's like, me. And then he's like, take your first shot. The Space Wolf cocks him in the face, and he just shrugs it. And then he's like, you done? He's like, yes, go ahead. And then the Lion hits him so hard, he goes through a wall and knocks his helmet off. And knocks him out.
And then we can go back to business.
Yes, it's pretty much, it was like, okay, we're back to business, boys. And it was just like that, too. Anyways, after dueling, there was a couple more things. The Battle of Sarash, which is very important if you're going to know anything about the Dark Angels and anything about Lionel Johnson. As I talked about Luther earlier, the seeds in his heart had kind of, corrupted him a little bit. He was still a good guy, and he was still friends with the Lion, but he tried extra hard to be better than the Space Marines that had came up around him. I mean, you had Squires and Junior Knights, and he was like their senior, and they were better than him technically. So he tried hard to be as good as his Primarch. And he followed the Lion up to the end. But then they went to Sarash. Sarash was a planet that was being brought into compliance, but the diplomats and the ambassadors were getting kind of the runaround. So they had delayed them for years, giving into the Imperium. Turns out they were secretly worshiping chaos. And then when the Lion showed up to, fix things, the ambassadors showed up. They both ships met in orbit. The tube connected both ships. He came onto the Lion ship, and then he cussed out the Lion, called them like demons and monsters and horrible people, and that they're disgrace to humanity for not, believing the ways that they believe. Just utter Reddit stuff.
Yeah.
And the Lion's like, you done? And then he runs him through with the sword.
So anyway, we started blasting.
And then turns out that they actually snuck a nuclear device onto the Lion ship.
Ooh.
So the Luther and a librarian actually found this explosive while Lion was talking to this ambassador. And Luthor, I keep calling him Luthor?
I don't know.
Luther finds this bomb, and then he thinks for a sec, wait a minute, I could be the Primarch. And then quick, he stops what he's doing, and then they get rid of it, like throw it out the airlock towards the other ship, and they blow it up, and they suffer minor damage to their ship. But it was that hesitation. And he admits to the librarian who was there with him, and he says, I hesitated, man, I'm sorry. So then the Lion finds out about this, and he, again, is a man of action, so this can be kind of a problem with communication, I will say. Nobody can read your thoughts if you don't talk. That's all I'm saying. So the Lion goes to Luther, and he's like, go back to Caliban, you and all the Space Marines with you, that you command, go back to Caliban and recruit new Dark Angels. You'll be there for the rest of the Crusade. Now, if you're Luther, what are you thinking?
I don't even know. I mean, like, you're benching me, coach?
Exactly. He felt like he was betrayed, like he was put down and punished. All of the Dark Angels who went with him did. And the Lion, in a way, in his mind, thought, look, I need to be good to them. I need more troops because of the Wrong Dawn Xenocides. But also, I can't play favorites. So he wasn't necessarily chastising them, but he wasn't necessarily rewarding them in his eyes.
Yeah, but I mean, what was he going to do with no army?
I mean, it wasn't all of his Dark Angels. It was just a good chunk.
Right.
So Luther, with these seeds of jealousy and anger, and his Dark Angels, heads back to Caliban. And that's when things start to
unravel?
Yeah, things get pretty bad. Horus gets named War Master, and as I told you before, the Lion is not exactly a fanfare, banners, and parades kind of guy. He just kept on trucking with the fight. All the Primarchs, except him, showed up to go see their brother get coronated as the War Master after their victory over the Orcs on Ulanor. And the Lion was like, cool.
I'm busy.
Pretty much. Good for him. Bye. And kept fighting. Yeah, this didn't go good for him. So eventually Horus turns traitor. The Lion, being far, far away, didn't care about anything that was going on and was very hard to hear anything that was going on. Horus met up with a bunch of his boys, all of the traitor Primarchs. Gave cancel, and he was only worried about a few Primarchs in question. The White Scars, because they were so neutral, they could go either way. The Blood Angels, because they fight real good. And then the Lion and the Dark Angels, because of how well they fight and how organized they were. There's no turning the Lion. He actually thought that he could turn the White Scars and the Blood Angels, but he needed all three of them off the board.
Right.
So he sent the Night Lord's Primarch, Conrad Kurz, to distract him. Conrad Kurz left a message saying, hey, Horus is a traitor. Come get me. He fought a long war against the Night Lords. The Isfahan drop site massacre happened. We'll get into that, but it was basically Pearl Harbor for the Imperium. And then to go after the Night Lords, the Lion knew he had to get his Legion organized. But with a force as big as a Legion, it takes some time to get things done. He was never going to make it in time.
Right.
And that's really the big problem with the Lion during the Horus Heresy. He could have done a huge difference, but the clock was against him. There was too much distance.
I imagine he goes back to Caliban to try to get the rest of his army together, and there's issue.
There's a couple things. Just before the Isfahan drop site massacre, he's like, you know what? I did read this file that was secreted away. Horus conquered this planet, and just before he finished his conquest, 5 years before he finished conquering it, he made these siege engines, big ones, that could go through any fortress, kind of like the Imperial Palace.
Like that one.
Yeah. And he knew, and it looked like he knew that he wouldn't finish getting these made until after the war was over. So why was he having them made? So the Lion sent a small force ahead and went with them, got to this planet to secure these siege engines, and that's when the Iron Warriors Primarch Perturabo, who will eventually become a traitor Primarch, who was at that time a traitor Primarch, says, hey man, what's going on? He's like, he wants to use these for evil. So Perturabo was like, man, you want me to take him? He's like, look, Horus went traitor. I will admit I was a little jealous he became War Master, but that's all. Here, have these, but just tell me one thing. And promise me one thing. Perturabo looks at him. He's like, what, Lion? Lion goes, make sure they're well used. And he's like, oh, don't worry about that, brother. And that's when the Isfahan drop site massacre happens. He basically used them on loyalist troops and just devastated them.
So I guess at that stage, the lion didn't realize that it wasn't just Horus.
Yeah, because, I mean, when you're a man of action, communication just isn't your thing. You don't pick up on cues.
I guess not.
He was more of a... Some people called the Space Wolf Primarch a man pretending to be an animal. The lion was more of a animal pretending to be a man. He was cold. He was distant, quiet, calculating. Every time you were in a room with him, you felt like he was sizing you up to kill you. Because he was.
Right.
Like a predator. Okay, so then he fought the Night Lords. The Night Lords were sent to slow him down. They did. He eventually captured the Night Lords Primarch, and there was a big hubbub. We'll talk about it later. I gotta keep going, guys, because we're running out of time. And after that, he showed up to another planet where the Iron Hands and the Death Guard were. They were fighting over this ancient relic on this Xenos planet, trying to get at it first. And then the lion shows up. He's like, hey, big bro's here. Knock it off. And then they both go their separate ways, which was weird because the Iron Hands were loyalist, Death Guard were traitor. He gets the relic called the T'Chulcha engine, and he installs it in a ship. It essentially is a big engine that is used to travel through the warp by bending space and time, not just in the normal warpy sense. It's kind of like Futurama. It moves the universe while the ship stays still. Kind of stupid stuff. Anyways, it comes into play later. After that, he tries everything he can to get back to Terra. He goes on a big thing with the Blood Angels Primarch and the Ultramarines Primarch. Talk about it later. And then he finally starts making his way to Terra because he found out that the Emperor was still alive. At this point, there were numerous warp storms trying to slow them all down.
At this point, has the Emperor been wounded and put on the throne?
About to be.
Okay.
See, there were so many warp storms, they couldn't get a message out. They couldn't travel at all. So they were lucky that those three met up. But they had assumed that the Emperor and everybody was dead. So they just bunkered down for a little while. Then they found out through, I guess, guesstimation and visions. If this is A and B, then the Emperor's still alive. So they went to Terra and braved the warp storms. The Ultramarines got there first because they're... No, wait, the Blood Angels. The Blood Angels got there first because they're cool. Screw Ultramarines. And Lion was like, you know what? If I'm slowed down, I'm taking them with me. So he went to each Traitor Primarch's home planet that he could find, and then he just burned them to the ground.
On the way.
On the way. And then he found out about the Emperor. He was pretty bummed out about that. So right then, around that time, that's when the Emperor fights Horus. And then gets put on the largest life support system ever made.
Okay.
He's so mad about this. He's like, I'm going to go to Caliban. I'm going to rethink things. And then he goes on his way. He runs into a greater demon of Tzeentch, who has the ability to tell the future completely accurately. But he has two heads, one that lies, one that tells the truth. His name's Kairos Fateweaver. And this and another thing that happened basically proves the Lion's loyalty. So this Tzeentch demon tries to corrupt him and sees all the potential futures out there. All of them. So he tries to corrupt the Lion. None of them show the Lion turning traitor. So then he says, I hear you can see a lot. Did you see your death? Shing! He literally says a one-liner like that. I mean, it was so cool.
Nice.
He makes his way to Caliban. And I'm going to take this a second to say, also before this, the Emperor met up with his buddy Malkador, and he planned out a lot of things. The Malkador was like, well, what if the Lion turns traitor? And the Emperor was like, he'll never do it. The Lion, on his way to Caliban, gets there. He sees his boys down on the planet, and then Luthor is like, we're traitors now. We worship chaos. And then Luthor is now a chaos champion. The same level of a Primarch. He's ascended, got chaos blood flowing through his veins. So the Lion, being the Lion, starts to bomb the planet. Just big time. Everything that they have just going. He goes down to the planet with a few good men. He gets into a fight with Luthor, and they duel big time. As they fight, Luthor uses all of the chaos energy he has to blast the Lion. The Lion gets mortally wounded, but then Luthor, being drained of all chaos taint, realizes, am I being a jerk right now? So he's like, I can't do this. Throws off the shackles of chaos, and chaos being bad sports, the Chaos Gods started a huge warp storm. That, on top of the bombardment, destroyed Caliban, and the only thing that got saved was the fortress of the Space Marines of the Dark Angels, called the Rock, eventually, because their force fields were that good. Luthor was eventually found by the Dark Angels on the Rock, and he was a big babbling mess because he was just psychotic. His brain had he was crazy. He said that the Lion would forgive me, the Lion would redeem me, he would find me and save me. And then he says the Lion was taken by the Watchers in the Dark, which are these little Ewok-looking dudes, or, the little sand people. And, or not Ewoks, I'm sorry, a little hooded, robed guys that you don't see their face. He had
Jawas.
Jawas, there you go. He had been spirited away by the Watchers in the Dark, who had been on Caliban since the beginning.
Always been there.
Yeah, no one knows anything about them. It's illegal to look under their hoods. And then it turns out Luthor was put into cryostasis. So he's been put into cryostasis.
Luthor, stark raving mad Luthor was.
Yes.
Okay.
He's been around for 10,000 years. Every new chapter master of the Dark Angels sees him when they're inducted, interrogates him, learns what they can, but he's a babbling mess, so yeah. And then the Lion was actually thrown into the warp. After some time, he came back onto the Rock, but no one noticed. The Watchers in the Dark took him away to the deep, deep dark of the Rock, hid him somewhere. Now the Dark Angels do not know where he is. So for 10,000 years, he has been on their prime fortress that they have now turned into a huge ship that they work out of, they have a fleet around of, they explore all the time, and none of them found him. For 10,000 years, he has been sleeping in the Rock, waiting to wake up. And cut to recently in the lore, Luthor escaped. A chaos invasion invaded the Rock, and Luthor was missing. Now, no one knew that Luthor was hidden there except for the Grand Master of the Dark Angels, the Chapter Master, because only they get to know. They are the only ones who have a key to this door. Luthor is missing, and it's said that a lot of the Space Marines who rebelled with him have now been coming together with him. These Space Marines were thrown into the warp along with the Lion, separately, but, whatever, and cast throughout distant time, to the past, the future, multiple planets. They can find them, randomly everywhere. So these people are called the Fallen, and the Dark Angels hunt them relentlessly for 10,000 years because they see themselves as irredeemable in the eyes of the Emperor, in the eyes of the Lion, in the eyes of the Imperium. And if anyone finds out their secret, it's game over. It makes them paranoid. They don't even trust fellow Space Marines. When Gilliman showed up with Primaris Marines, they almost killed him. And then when they accepted Primaris Marines, they tortured them for information and then wiped their memories. They are paranoid. They are nightly. They are killers just like the Lion. And recently, there have been rumors of a large figure hunting in the darks of random planets across the Imperium that kills the great beasts that hunt others. Rumors of this giant swinging a sword. Maybe he's the Emperor incarnate, but it's really could be the Lion. The Lion recently has awoken. The Watchers in the Dark have woken him in the deep dark. And then he has a new power to use the ancient force of Caliban to walk from place to place, across planets, across time, and reach out and kill those creatures. What he's doing, it's not really well known. But is he the savior that will save the Imperium and kill the foes of the Emperor? We'll have to see. And again, I have summarized the best I can out of everything. We'll probably have an episode about the Fallen. We'll probably have an episode about the Dark Angels, but that is it. It's everything.
Yeah, I want to get my head around Cypher and the Fallen and all that. Because,
I can't wait.
Because it doesn't make sense to me how there's this one Dark Angel guy that I can take in my Chaos Space Marine Black Legion army.
Oh, yeah.
And that will be fascinating.
Yeah, and the Dark Angels changed their colors after that day to green. So now all the Fallen are in black armor. So every now and again they're like, hey, did you see a guy in black armor? And they're like, maybe. And then they kill that guy, and then they go looking for the guy in the armor.
That's Lionel Johnson. That's our first specific Primarch podcast.
Yeah.
I think it went well.
There was so much. I have been talking nonstop. My throat is a mess because I'm kind of sick today, I think. And I can't wait to get more into it. Like I
can't wait for the Twitter comments about what you got wrong.
Oh, dude, there's going to be so many. Because when you talk about a Primarch, everybody's going to weigh in.
Is he Luthor or is he Luthor, as in Lex Luthor?
Let's just shave his head and
somebody start a fight about which it is.
Yeah, so
bring honor for your Luthor or Luthor people.
Yeah.
Rate and review.
Go on
Listen
our socials.
for more. Go on the socials. Tell your grandma about the podcast and stuff. 10th edition is possibly out by the time that we record, by the time you hear this, because
it's a couple weeks
the
away,
timeline has never been more messed up. We're going to have a lot of 10th edition content, though, because I've been looking at some of the rules. In theory, they've been leaked, or possibly they've just been released.
Yeah.
You never can tell with Games Workshop.
They're looking pretty good.
But until next time, I've been Shane, that's Casey, giving you the lore on Lionel Johnson. Does he have a model? Oh my gosh, yes he does. He's got 2 of them. I've never seen the 30K one, but I'm going to go look it up after this. We'll be back next week with more Bits Box, more main topics. I don't know what episode's coming next, but we've recorded it, but I've forgotten. You guys, see you later.
See you out there in the grim dark, guys.